my whole world was consumed by this thing. I used to get bruises from pinching myself, and I was just so confused. I was honestly in the headspace where I was like, I don't know what's wrong. I was like, oh, this isn't going to get better. Is this an eating disorder? It can't be an eating disorder. If I tell someone this, they're going to think I'm insane and put me somewhere. That's what I was thinking.
You could probably get like another conversation, but it wouldn't be the same conversation. And then you'd be trying to make it the thing that it was before.
You'd have to leave it a while.
You'd have to leave it a
while. I
while.
was doing one once and he forgot to hit record. And he texted me about an hour later. He said, man, I'm so sorry.
Did you do it again?
It's about an hour and 15. And I said, he's like, can we do it again? I was like, you're going to have to leave it 6 weeks or 2 months. Like, so we did. And it was okay the second time. Like, I think it was grand. It came out fine, but I have no idea what we talked about the first time.
Yeah. It's gone into the ether now, into the podcast ether. Just lives there by itself.
Just forgot to hit record, poor lad.
Yeah, well, on the team of that, I'm just going to roll straight into this intro. Mr. Cormac Ryan, welcome to the Primal Podcast.
How are things, Dan?
Things are great. How are things with you?
I'm here, so I'm not too bad in this fancy studio. So
do you like the studio?
I'm very impressed. First time I've ever had headphones like this on.
What did you expect coming in? Because I know you've followed the page.
I expected to meet probably like someone famous in here. I thought you were like locking them away in cabinets. Well, I did, yeah. The man behind it all. Yeah. But I didn't know. I was flicking back through some more of your episodes today, and I was like, Jesus, what am I doing here?
Well, I think you know what you're doing here. You're here because I believe you've something to contribute to this journey that I'm on anyway, personally, because your story's been a bit of a source of inspiration for me. And I know it's awful when someone sits across you and looks in the eye and says that to you. It's a weird word and it's a weird thing to hear, but you need to hear it because it's true. And also, I think we're going to have a great conversation. And the reason I know that is you arrived an hour and a half ago, and we've only pressed record now because we've been shiting on for the last 90 minutes.
We'll see what comes up.
We'll see what comes up. Yeah. So, this is standard podcast etiquette. There's probably people listening who know exactly who you are. They might have seen the documentary on RTE, which was fantastic, by the way, or who might have followed your journey cycling across America, or the four separate events you've done now. Is it four?
Yeah.
Raising money for charity. But for anyone who's not familiar with those stories, would you give us just a brief background, whatever way you want to do it? You can sing a song, you can do a dance, you can tell a story. Just tell us who you are.
I'm about as bog standard bloke from North Dublin as they come. I'm 29, physiotherapist, Gahead.
Whitehall, we'll let it go.
Whitehall on the north side of Dublin. Yeah, just physiotherapist in my day job, played a bit of...
I'm going to pull you straight away, right? I get in trouble for doing this. You're not actually a physiotherapist. What did you study originally?
Sorry, actually, yes.
I get pulled all the time for this.
How dare I betray the people who put hours into us? First and foremost, I'm an athletic therapist. And then I went and did a master's in physiotherapy. And my athletic therapy background gave me a wealth of knowledge that I'm very, very grateful for. And 4 great years in DCU. So athletic therapist, physiotherapist, play a bit of hurling football, and then sort of accidentally, by pure chance, fell into the world of endurance cycling, maybe? Do we call it that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, any longer than 10K is endurance to me, so it's endurance cycling.
Yeah, so that's really me. Like, and I've had a few kind of health hiccups along the way, and I've probably tried to use them in as positive a way possible. And I guess that's how it kind of ultimately leads me occasionally to fancy studios like this.
To tell your story and share your story, yeah. You're underselling this a little bit here because endurance cycling, endurance anything is crazy. We were just talking about Conor O'Keefe there, who has just finished Project 32 marathons, 32 days, 32 counties, 32 pounds. But if anybody who's ever tried anything, a 5K, a 2K, to walk to the shops, we know that there's scalable effort involved in doing anything that requires consistent, long-term effort, or whatever you want to call it. So give people a little bit of background on, one, how you got into cycling, and two, why you decided to then cycle across countries.
Right, how did I get into cycling? So let me get this clear. I'm a GA head, always have been. Hurling, first love. Football, second love. Never had any interest in cycling. Then I was playing underage hurling with Dublin in 2011. We got to an All-Ireland final. Fast forward 6 months. Very long story short, I ended up in coronary care at the age of 18, diagnosed with a serious enough cardiac condition. Ended up leaving 2 weeks later with a pacemaker in my chest. There's a whole other story with that in terms of what that meant. But ultimately, afterwards, I really, really struggled. Like you take an 18-year-old and you say, right, we found this cardiac condition. You are to give up contact sports, which I refuse to do. You may never be that fit or active again. This could have killed you. Take a year out of college, you won't be mentally right. And you send them home from coronary care in Beaumont Hospital with no psychological support or kind of consideration of what this might do to an 18-year-old psychologically. I fell into a pretty dark place. And in hindsight now, understandably, I did. Like, what else was going to possibly happen? I wasn't going to go home and just be fine. Yeah. At the time, I thought that, but like in reality, it was never going to happen. So after about 9 months of really, really struggling, not sleeping well, not eating well, not looking after myself, just falling into a really, really low mood. Hand on heart, can't say I ever considered taking my own life. I wouldn't be... it wouldn't be fair of me to say that it got to that extent, so to maybe what other people are suffering. But I just had a really disruptive life event and I didn't deal with it well. And it got the better of me. And as I said, after about 9 months, I was like, I need to do something here to make myself feel better. I still don't know if hurling and football is going to be a thing for me in the future. I hope to get back, but I don't know. Thankfully I did, but at the time I just didn't know. So I was like, okay, how can I make myself feel better? How can I stop this guilty feeling because I've survived and other people have died that were my age? How do I take away some of this depression? And I said, right, I'm going to cycle around Ireland for charity at the age of 19. Now, bear in mind at this stage, this was September, October 2012. I got the pacemaker in February 2012. I had just turned 19. I was about probably 1.5 stone overweight. I hadn't done any exercise in about 6 or 7 months. I was massively depressed. And I went to my parents saying this. Very supportive, but I knew well in their heads, they were like, this isn't a thing. Like he's just on one here this evening. Like this won't be a thing. Fast forward 6 months later again to April 2013. Me, my brother, my cousin, and 2 of my good friends. None of us cyclists, all GAA players, none of us elite athletes. Cycled 1,200 kilometres around the coastline of Ireland.
As you do.
As you do at 19 years old. Hadn't a clue what we were doing, but just got this whole whirlwind of support and raised like 35 grand, which back in 2013 was a substantial amount of money.
Even now, but back then especially, yeah.
Back then especially, and just got this whole world of support. And then that's kind of how I found the bike in a way, by pure chance. And I kind of just fell into then doing these sort of things. Like it was never something that would have been on my radar. And even still in the aftermath, I managed to thankfully get back playing hurling at a high level. I played under 20 with Dublin, played Fitzgibbon Cup with DCU. Was never really quite good enough to cut it at senior level on the county stage. But I went back hurling at a pretty high level. And even then the bike was kind of put to the back burner again. Then in 2015, I got this notion. Do you know what? That thing I did in 2013, cycling around the country, I wasn't really doing it for the right reasons. I didn't like that. I did it because I wanted to make myself feel better. I didn't do it for charity. I didn't do it to help other people. I didn't do it to raise awareness of cardiac conditions. Externally, I did, but really and truthfully, I did it for myself, which was pretty selfish, but I probably needed to do it at the time. And in 2015, then I was like, do you know what? We're going to do something again. This time for purer reasons. And we cycled through all 32 counties in Ireland, 10 days, about another 12 or 1,300 kilometres. And it was a bit more of an authentic journey. I was in a much better place physically and mentally. Raised another 20 grand or so. And that's kind of how I fell into cycling. And then in the years after that, cycled across Europe from Achill to Athens, cycled across America from San Francisco to New York. And I still don't really like cycling.
You're still trying to figure it out if you like it or not.
I don't like the sport. I've no interest in the sport. I've no interest in bikes themselves. I like the physical act of cycling, but you will never catch me out with a group of 20 or 30 cyclists spinning around Dublin, taking over the roads or watching the Tour de France or anything like that.
I suppose that is the sport of cycling. Yeah. Is it the adventure more than... Yeah, it's the adventure side of things.
The adventure.
Yeah, it's funny as well. Completely different. Not requiring my own physical energy. I like motorbikes. I love riding motorbikes. I've no interest in joining like doing biker things and going to biker group. I just like the sense of adventure, getting on the bike and heading off, maybe with a mate of mine and doing cool stuff. And the bike can facilitate that. And I think, I'm getting a feeling from you, cycling is the same kind of thing. So I'm going to forgive you because you're not a cyclist. You're an adventure dude who uses his bike to get around places and raise money.
The bike just gives me an ability to go after two things which I like, which is endurance and adventure.
Yeah.
And it allows me a means. I never would have imagined that cycling a bike would have allowed me a means whereby I can use it in an attempt to try and give back.
Okay.
And that's really all it's done for me. Adventure, endurance, contribution, charity.
There's something interesting you said there that I want to ask you about, because you said it's a selfish thing because you did it for your own reasons. And I have this conversation with people sometimes. I can't remember where I read it initially first, but it was this concept of if you're doing something to contribute or to help somebody else or to raise money, whatever it is, and you feel good from doing that, does it negate the reason that you're doing it? Does it not become a charitable thing anymore because you're doing it for yourself? And I respectfully completely disagree, because you're doing it to feel good. If by contributing or helping other people you feel good, that's a win-win situation. And it's a weird thing to think about. It's like, yeah, but am I doing it for the right reasons? I'm actually doing it to be selfish, but you're still doing it.
In 2013 and 2015, when I was doing those original cycling things, the very low level things that I was doing before I got to Europe and America, I would have been like, no, everything has to be pure. It can't be for any self-benefit.
Yeah.
As I've matured and as I've aged, I've realised that that's a ridiculous outlook.
100%.
Like when it came to crossing America, I was very open about the fact, and I've said it on other podcasts, I was doing America first and foremost because I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
2, it was even better and a bonus that I could attach a cause that I was so passionate about, which was kind of opening the world of eating disorders and recovery for men. I could bring that along with me.
Yeah.
So I was benefiting body-wise. I was hopefully benefiting other males and females out there that were suffering. But first and foremost, I was benefiting myself.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that now.
As you should be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a concept I think about. I've been thinking about a lot lately. This kind of Jordan Peterson talks about your campfire. Being the light you want other people to see, like leading by example. And if you know that contributes to other people's well-being, or can contribute financially through charity work, or can contribute psychologically by sharing your story, which is therapeutic for the person sharing their story as well, that's a great thing. You're just doing, you're being, and as a result, other people are going to be inspired by that or learn from that, benefit from that. So I think it's very admirable what you do, and that's why I use the word inspiration. I don't use that word lightly. It's my choice whether I'll get inspired by you or not you.
It's true, but I don't know. I just... there's certain things that still I find quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I don't know if the word inspirational is something that... I don't know. I don't know whether it should be attributed to me or you or Damien Brown, who's currently halfway across the North Atlantic, or Conor O'Keefe, who's just finished 32 marathons in 32 days. I don't know why. We're all in a very ideal position to take on the things we're taking on.
Yeah.
Come in and join me in work for a week and see the challenges that certain people have to overcome that isn't even on most of our radars, and then you kind of, in my head, then you get inspirational.
Yeah.
And I genuinely mean that. It's very easy to do all these things when you're in a privileged position physically and mentally, whereby you're actually able to do them if you really try. Some of the stuff I see every day, what people are doing where they have no right to be doing it, that to me is probably more of a true definition of inspirational. I think too often inspirational gets thrown and attached to the glamorous stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like the really glamorous stuff.
Yeah.
And like, and these kind of physical feats, which there's a bit of glamour, I suppose, attached to them. I think there's plenty of people in the world doing extremely inspirational stuff, giving of their free time and of their careers to go work in the missions in Africa or help sick children in Yemen or Syria. Like, I don't know.
Do you want my take on it?
Yeah, go on.
I think that word is loaded. I think it's a problem with the language we use, the word inspirational. So when I use that word, what I mean by saying it is that it inspires me to want to be a better version of myself. So I know that sounds very Hallmark, but it inspires something, a thought or a feeling in me when I see you. First of all, when I saw you on the documentary, that touched something inside of me. I didn't struggle with eating, but I had my own struggles, and they weren't the same as yours. But you were able to inspire. You spoke about talking, and you spoke a lot about talking. Talk to someone, because it helps a lot in lightening the load or in letting you know that you're not by yourself. That really spoke to me and inspired me to want to talk more. So that word, I think we use the word inspiration as, oh, your man is an inspiration. Look how amazing he is. But for me, that word means you inspired either a thought in me or a feeling or an emotion that could make me a better version of myself. You see it in the people that you work with. I used to see it in the people that I worked with in the clinic as well. They also inspired me. And it's a different type of inspiration, but it's the same thing. I think there's a problem with the language sometimes. And what really is a good measure of the person with me is when I tell somebody that they've been an inspiration to me, if they act like you just acted there, really uncomfortable, it's a good sign for me. Because you don't want that word. You just want to do the thing.
Yeah, and I think part of that, if I'm being honest, is probably a bit of I'm probably projecting a bit, because ultimately my unwillingness to accept that probably comes from, you say that word and I immediately think, am I worthy to have that word attached to my name? And like the fundamental, when they talk about eating disorders, there's this whole thing that they say, it's not about food. It is about food, but it's not about food.
Yeah.
And with me, it's never been about food. And you say that word and it probably goes back to this kind of thing within me, kind of, am I deserving of that? Am I worthy enough to be associated with that? And as much as I've come on a ton and I'm in as good as a mental place as I have been in years, someone says that word and there's still that big piece of me that is like, no, get yourself away from that word as fast as possible. That couldn't possibly be attaching that to you. And it's one thing I suppose I've really struggled with since I came home. Not struggled with, I suppose struggles a push, but since I came home from America is the nice things people say about you. And I'm always first to say, well, look, anyone could do this, anyone could do that. So I'm probably projecting a small bit, if I'm being honest.
That's good though. It's good to be aware of that as well. There's a couple of things I've noticed. Definitely, it's a massive trait with Irish people. People make a joke about the pennies thing. Oh, you look lovely, pennies. But that's a meme of something that is very real and alive in this country. Like we don't have a huge amount of acceptance of ourselves and a huge amount of willingness to accept pride in ourselves. There's a lot of shame in this country. I won't speculate about where it came from. There's a lot of shame in this country. It's part of who we are. It's part of our culture. And I've been looking at this a lot lately in terms of this generational emotions and generational baggage and trauma. So that's real and alive. Also, all of the experiences you would have gone through personally. You said it so many times. I've heard you say so many times this idea of you don't deserve to eat when you're talking about your eating. And every time you said it, I was like, that is so powerful. It's so incredible to hear you say that, like to admit that you were saying that to yourself. You don't deserve it. So again, when I say that word and you got so uncomfortable when I said inspiration there, that's a good sign for me. But you're aware of it. But it also means you're not doing anything to be inspirational. You're just doing your thing. You're going cycling because you want to cycle, but you're doing it for charity. You went and did that documentary. I don't know how that came up. I'll ask you about that. But you're speaking out. You're trying to help. You're contributing. You're talking about topics that are private and vulnerable and uncomfortable, and you're making them not private and allowing us to be part of that journey. That stuff inspires me to want to do similar things, to want to help. So that's why I say it, just to be very clear. But I like, not that I like it, but when I see your type of reaction, it's usually a good sign, because it means that it's not really attached to that ego, that side of the ego.
The only thing I am that I would say that when you say it's that word is about kind of making people want to be a better version of themselves. The only thing part of that word that I would take and be like, yeah, okay, that might be a fair kind of comment is that I am, and I only said this to someone recently, I am unapologetically and unashamedly myself. And as much as my behaviour and how I go about things might be unusual for a 29-year-old bloke from North Dublin, and some of the stuff I talk about and some of the things I harp on about and my values, etc., I absolutely am myself, which is something that I think a lot of people are afraid to be. Maybe that would be the only part of me that I'm a bit like, right, if that aspect could make someone just be themselves a bit more, maybe I'd take that, but that's about it.
Why do you think you're like that?
Because I eventually just kind of accepted who I was. I would have been extremely self-conscious and shy growing up. Like when I was went to school in St. Aidan's, a school in the north side of Dublin, real sort of mixed cohort in there. Like, and it would have been a bit of a free for all in the hallways and at lunchtime. And I remember always feeling so out of my depth. Even when I first went up playing senior hurling football in our GA club, some of the old school lads still around, and you can imagine some of the chat that would have went on. I remember just feeling so uncomfortable. And then I eventually just got to the stage where I was kind of so sick of kind of just sitting in the corner, I suppose, and just kind of floating along that I was just like, do you know what, screw this, I'll just be me. And yeah, probably never really got, I don't know. I think when you're yourself, you don't really get a huge amount of negative feedback as long as you're just being authentic. And you know what, it served me well. It hasn't led me down any dodgy paths by just being myself. But it probably, yeah, I'm probably just, I don't know if brave is the right word, but I don't know why I'm able to do it. But yeah, I eventually learned how. Stopped. There was no act.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's one of the most common questions nowadays: identity. Who am I? Well, and am I this political group? Am I this social movement? Am I this thing? People like to attach themselves to things because they don't have a strong sense of their own identity. And you said something earlier on that kind of gave me a clue as to what you've just said there is, with your job, you're currently working part-time because it gives you the freedom to live the life that you want to live. And you've decided that for yourself. So you've managed to pull your head out of that, what you're supposed to be race. This is what you're supposed to work and make a ton of money and work 50, 60, 70 hours. And you've decided to design a lifestyle for yourself, which is, again, another clue for me. When people say that unprompted, I'm like, oh, okay, this guy's thinking about things a little bit differently because he values his time and experience more than the rat race, I suppose, or the what's expected of us.
I think there's two parts probably that allow me to be so myself. Is one, I've never got caught up in the whole, and even when I was a teenager, I never got involved in the whole fake male bravado bullshit.
The status game, yeah.
I always hated it. Never got involved in it. I used to get slagged a lot when we were kind of going through late teens, early 20s, being like, oh, sure, slagging me because I had female friends. And I was just like, well, maybe I have female friends because I'm displaying some sort of other side rather than the pig-headed charade that we all go on with as young men. So I never really got involved in that. So I never had to ditch it. So I think that always allowed me to be myself. And then, so the other thing is if you know your values, it's a lot easier to be yourself. And I think a lot of people don't even know their values. And that was one thing that going through treatment really taught me was know your values. And if you stick to your values, it won't lead you too far wrong. Like, and for me, my two biggest things I value in this world are time and my health. If I said the number 629 to you or to anyone else, it wouldn't mean anything. I'm always very aware of time, right? And I always like, when I say this, people either are always a bit like, that's really morbid, or they're like, this is a weird way to look at things. If I live to be the average life expectancy of an Irish male, I've got 629 months left. And I
From now?
From now.
What's the average life expectancy?
82.3 years.
82.3.
That's the most recent figure. And if I live to be 82.3 years, I have about 629 months left. And people hear me say that and they're like, what is that dude on about? But if you think about it, we all take time as the most valuable thing we have. You can't put a price on it, and yet we all take it for granted. So you start valuing time, and then all of a sudden you really start kind of dialing in on what you want. So yeah, 629 months is what I've got left, and so I value that. So for me, earning 700 €, less a month gives me a half day every day. I'm like, that's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
You know, it's an absolute no-brainer. Is a half day every day for a month worth 700 quid? It absolutely is, because it gives me time to do the things I love doing. And it gives me the time to look after my health. And because I look after my health, I can make the most of the time I have, rather than spending my day doing something I may not exactly want to be doing to earn all this money that I then don't have time to use. And doing all this work makes me so tired that I then don't have any time to look, or effort or motivation to look after my health. So then my health deteriorates, and then I spend all that money looking after the health that I've neglected. That's how I think about things. It's not everyone's outlook. My dad occasionally says I need to be grounded in reality a bit more. Maybe he's right. But time and health are the two biggest things to me. And then my other ones are authenticity, contribution, adventure, endurance. And because I value my time and my health so much, and they're not wrapped up and neglected by doing other things, I have the ability to then worry about authenticity, giving it something back through contribution, going out and doing these endurance things I like, going out and seeing the world, adventuring.
Yeah.
And again, all those things back to, why am I able to be myself? Because I know my values. I know what I want out of this world. I know what I want out of this life. I know who I am, what I am. And if there's ever anything that where I'm like, will I do this? I'm not sure about this. Does it line up with my values?
Do you get pulled out of that by the environment that we exist in, by the real world, as maybe your dad would say?
Of course.
Yeah.
We all try. Every day there's a temptation to get pulled out of it.
Yeah.
Like I know work would have me full time in a heartbeat if they could. And every day, maybe not every day, every second or third day, I'm kind of like, should I up my hours a bit?
And what drives that thought? Is it, should I up my hours because I need more money, because I need to buy a car?
Everyone else is buying a gaff and getting mortgage approval and, trying to get tied down. And so we're all human. So we all look around us and take that in. So that sinks in, but you just have to be, I suppose I have to be that bit more aware of it to try and bash it out and be like, wait, no, is that what I really want?
Yeah.
Do I want to work full time, have an extra 5 or 6 grand at the end of the year, but not have had time to go for my swim in the afternoon, go for my run, go for my trail run up Ticknock, go out on the bike for a few hours when the sun is shining? You know?
Yeah. I do know.
You do. It's very easy to get drawn back in. Of course it is.
100%. What you've just spent the last 5 minutes explaining there dominates the majority of conversations that I have nowadays. I always tend to circle back to this thing because I agree with you 1000%. I'm really confused about how you have this outlook at 29, which is extremely mature. Did it come from, was this something since your treatment, since you started to actively delve into the corners of your mind? Have you uncovered this, or have you been working on this? Because what you've got is an incredible sense of clarity. And I know this because I have been doing a load of practices lately to try and gain more clarity around what I want and what's important to me. And you mentioned what was the number again? 630?
629.
629. I've done exercises like the eulogy exercise, where you write your own eulogy for your own funeral. And I've thought excessively about my deathbed and what it'd be like to die and when I'm going to die. I haven't counted the days or months yet, but that's not weird to me at all, because it creates a sense of urgency in a positive way, urgency to live. So there's 629 months left. I want to live every single day of every single one of those months. That's what I'm urgent about. I'm not like, I'm going to die. Yeah, I'm completely comfortable that I'm going to die. I have no fear of death at all. But I want to make sure that every day I have between now and then is full. But I spend a lot of time. I have a lot of people helping me to try and come to that. And you've just told me that's your outlook. It's really, really impressive. Really impressive. Do you know how it developed?
Several health complications.
Yeah, because I was going to say, the only place I've really seen this happen, you mentioned health was one of the big things that you value. I worked in that medical industry for a long time, and until somebody had a heart attack, they didn't care about their health. And then they had a heart attack, and it was the only thing that was important to them. These were super successful, quote unquote, people who had everything, and they gave it all up then to focus on their health and being happy after they had the heart attack. And I became obsessed with, I don't want to have a heart attack. So how do I become that obsessed with my time in my life without having a heart attack, or having the emotional heart attack or the psychological heart attack, a medical scare or a scare of yourself, I suppose. So you went through some complications in life, I suppose.
Very simple, 2-pronged. You get a pacemaker at 18, and you have a cardiologist standing in front of you saying, if we hadn't got this, it may have ended differently. No guarantees. I might have survived.
Yeah.
But
what was the actual condition? What was the name of the condition?
So it's a thing called atrioventricular block. So basically my heart was slowing down to like 25 beats a minute. It was stopping intermittently for up to 5 seconds.
5 seconds?
5 seconds, I wouldn't even notice. Skipping beats.
Jesus.
Electricals, structurally my heart's fine. The electricals are an absolute SH1T show.
How was it caught?
I was playing and training, kept getting dizzy spells, chest pains. Didn't go into a cardiac arrest, but kind of kept fainting on the pitch essentially. Chest pain, dizzy spells. 3 or 4 hospital trips. 2 or 3 hospital trips, 1 in an ambulance, all sent home. No, he's fine. Probably just his asthma.
Any links with this and like the likes of sudden lateral death syndrome?
That's what it would have. If I had it passed on the pitch, say, they had never caught it, and 5 years later had it passed on the pitch, it would have fallen under that
bracket. Yeah,
under that bracket.
That's one thing people don't understand. You're fit, you're young, you're healthy, you're playing ball. How are these people dropping dead? And it's stuff like this. It's fascinating.
So that's what the bracket would have fallen under. So consultant looks at you and says, "Look, this could have ended very differently." From that moment, I was rewired a bit in terms of my awareness of time, and it was like a switch went off in my head, being like, okay, we're not immortal. Our time on this planet is finite. You need to be making the most of this time because it could all change in an instant. That was there, but then the clarity around it, I never quite knew about values, or there was never much clarity around it. And then the eating disorder brings you back down to earth and really humbles you. And you know what? And I wouldn't have had the emotional intelligence when I got the pacemaker and the cardiac condition at 18, 19 to figure it all out. All I knew was that, okay, time is limited and bad things can happen. I need to make the most of it. Then you go into treatment for an eating disorder for 8 weeks at 28 years old. It's a very rare thing when you've developed fully emotionally and maturity-wise in your late 20s to be able to take 8 weeks, 2 months out of your life where you do nothing for 12 hours a day but examine every morsel and fibre of your soul, because that's all we did.
Christ.
Hours upon hours of therapy every single day for 8 weeks. And you know what? I won't recommend eating disorder, but I'd highly recommend that, because I came out of Lowest Bridges, the eating disorder treatment facility that I was in just this time last year. I came out on the 20th of August last year. It's near the end of August now. So I'm only out a year, but the clarity I came out with in terms of who I am, what I am, my values, what do I really value? And I think that's where the clarity came from. So the obsession with time probably came from the pacemaker, and then the obsession with my life, what my values are, how I want to live it, who I am, and being authentic probably came from the eating disorder and the treatment. And I think it's those two aspects that, because I have clarity in that.
Yeah.
It can be hard not to get drawn away from it sometimes, but I do have clarity. But yeah, and that's why I try never to sound too preachy or anything like that, because the only reason my headspace is like that is because pacemaker, significant mental health issues after, and an eating disorder. And let me tell you something about an eating disorder. An eating disorder will humble you like nothing else. It will kick the shit out of you for years on end, and it is the cruelest thing you can endure. I remember watching that Hell Week thing that was on RTE, and the lads, like, the shit they be giving people on it, and I remember thinking to myself, I was like, yes, that's absolutely grim, and I wouldn't like the cold water, but I was like, the shouting that's going on in their face and all that, I was like, still not a patch on what was going on in my head. So that thing brings you back down to earth, and it really makes you, trying to get over it really makes you learn who you are and what you are and what you want. So I think that's probably where the clarity comes from. So I'm lucky.
Yeah.
I am lucky to have that clarity at 29, because that's a gift I have for life, because some people go through life and they're still trying to figure out who they are, what they want, what their values are. And some people never reach that.
Let me add to that. Most people, I feel, in my experience anyway, most people are searching for that clarity. You asked me at the start, or you said you didn't know why you're on the podcast. This is the reason, because listening to you talk about this is so valuable for anybody. If they're struggling, not struggling, if they're trying to find clarity and have clarity, it's really valuable to hear you speak like this, because there are lessons to be learned here. And I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, to maybe elaborate a little bit on that journey with the eating disorder. I know you've probably told the story a million times, but I think it's important, and we'll circle back then around to the lessons that we can pull from what you've gone through. Because again, I'm obsessed with this idea that we're not all going to have something as overtly obvious in our face as an eating disorder or a heart attack or something to give us the kick up the arse that we need. So we need to learn lessons from people who do struggle to bring into our own lives. And then by doing that, we could potentially help the type of people that you're now helping in a clinic like that, people who don't have the option. Because you correctly said that we're privileged to be able to do these things to kind of improve ourselves. But a lot of us don't know how to do them. And if we're capable and we're not able to do them, that's doing a disservice to us and the people who are not capable. That's my belief on that. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of an overview of how this story unfolded in your life with eating.
With food.
With food.
How can it get to the stage where something as so natural as food can become such an issue?
Yeah.
I'm still trying to figure that one out.
But you did say yourself, it's not about the food. It's about the food, but not about the food. It's not about the food.
Yeah. It all goes back to the pacemaker.
Yeah.
So I'm 29 now. I got the pacemaker at 18. And I only came to terms with this last summer. So 10 years.
Jesus.
10 years being a very confused man. So you get the pacemaker, your mood drops, hurling and football are taken away. Let me say, starting out, that I was your typical growing 18-year-old boy. Didn't think about what I ate, didn't think about what I looked like. Put it in perspective. The night before the All-Ireland minor hurling final in 2011, Saturday evening, so I was playing in Croke Park the next day. Chances are there was going to be 50 or 60,000 people in the stadium by the end of our game, say. Biggest game of my life. I had a pizza and 2 packets of jellies. Right?
Solid.
And I probably had Cocoa Pops that morning.
Carb loaded.
Yeah, right? So like, nothing, never gave a second thought to food or what I looked like, really. In a general sense, like. Got the pacemaker, mood dropped. Without even realising I put on weight. Wasn't very active. They told me, you need to rest.
Are these side effects of having a pacemaker or just from the news you got and the experience?
A bit of both. So I got the pacemaker in and they were like, look, just you need to take it easy now for a while. I think they were trying to still really figure out what was going on. One of the things that baffled them the most was they could never find a reason for the condition. Okay. So my whole family got screened. They couldn't find a genetic connection. They hypothesized that I probably had some small defect from birth that was probably exacerbated by all the high level training. So in the aftermath, I suppose the inactivity, the low mood, the not wanting to do much, to not being able to do much, and then just being depressed. So I turned to food without even realizing. I put on a bit of weight. Not massive amounts, like not whereby people would have been like, Jesus, he's gotten a lot heavier, but enough whereby you probably would have noticed that I was out of shape again. So I probably put on about a stone and a half. Didn't really notice it. Then it got to kind of within 9 months later when I kind of had to start getting ready for that cycle that I first told you about, and I wanted to get back playing hurling. And just little comments started being made here and there, particularly around the hurling environment. Just like, oh, you've put on a bit of timber. That jersey's a bit tighter. You've wintered well, my personal favourite. And look, for 9 out of 10 lads that are in those dressing rooms, we've all heard them, probably wouldn't have affected them. But it stuck with me for whatever reason. And I remember just clinging to it, being like, I'm really badly out of shape here. I need to do something about this. That started the cycle. So we're kind of talking end of 2012, early 2013. My awareness came to my weight and my shape and what I looked like. And I was like, right, I need to change 1 or 2 things here. So I did what you'll hear loads of people do. I cut out carbs, got on the turkey burgers, got on the chicken breasts, gym in the morning, cardio in the evening, whatever way you wanted to do it. Run more, eat less, no sweets, no sugar, whatever. And the weight kind of fell off me pretty quickly. Was super fit by 2014 then. And then kind of through my years in DCU, 2014, 2015, I would have been a bit funny about food, but I didn't have an eating disorder, nowhere near it. Slightly disorderly eating habits. I wouldn't have eaten like I wouldn't have eaten a lot of bread or a lot of pasta, and I would have been very conscious, and I would have been in the gym a couple of days a week, and I would have watched what I eat. Like the crew in college would have joked, they were like, "Oh, you're afraid of carbs," but that was the running joke, and no one ever taught anything on it. But I was still eating 3 meals a day, eating a good amount of food. I could get a takeaway. I could go out for dinner with the class, get ice cream, have a few sweets on a Friday or Saturday evening, no problem. Then, so this whole 10-year deterioration was so slow and gradual. At this stage, I was super fit. 2015, 2016, super fit. Not a pick of body fat on me. Back playing with Dublin under 21 level, playing Fitzgibbon Cup at DCU, playing senior hurling with the club. And I kind of fell into this kind of thing that they call orthorexia. They've given a name to it now, which is like an obsession with clean eating. And I took it a bit further. So I was like on the chicken breasts and the turkey burgers and the broccoli and the veg. It got to the stage where I wouldn't even have like a wrap. Even that was like too carby for me. Wouldn't touch bread, wouldn't touch pasta. I wouldn't even have rice. A lot of salads. And I became really, really stupidly clean. I cut out all the sweets, cut out the treats. Wouldn't have a takeaway. I was just stupidly clean for like 2016, 2017, 2018. And it wasn't healthy. That was the stage where I started getting anxiety around certain things. So if I went over to my mate's house for a cup of tea, they'd be like, "Do you want a bar of chocolate? Do you want a slice of cake? Do you want to grab food?" If it was unplanned, I'd get anxious about it. And by 2018, I kind of was like, this isn't really normal. It was starting to affect my playing on the pitch. The week of games, I was becoming more obsessed with what I looked like on the pitch and more obsessed with losing weight during the week of a game rather than carb loading, resting, performance. Performance was nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And I used to wonder why I'd be tired on the pitch. So it really started to take a hold of me kind of towards the end of 2018. I kind of had stopped enjoying hurling and football. I was kind of becoming really anxious about what I ate, couldn't flex, couldn't do something spontaneous. And it kind of became problematic. Then in 2019, I kind of in my head knew there was a problem. Now bear in mind, I was so confused by all this. I was 26-year-old bloke, was spending way too long looking at myself in the mirror and kind of too paranoid about what I was eating. And I'd gone really thin. I'd gone really scrawny. Like I'm 6'2", 6'3", playing senior hurling football in Dublin. I shouldn't be getting knocked off the ball. And I was like...
If you're playing Fingallians, maybe.
Yeah, maybe if I'm playing against you. You know, I was getting knocked off the ball in tackles that I just shouldn't be like. Yeah. And I knew that. So I kind of made a decision then. I was like, right, there's something wrong here with me and food. I need to put back on a bit of weight. And I tried to do it myself. Now, at this stage, my psychological state and the whole mindset around food and body image had gone so haywire that trying to do it myself just led me into this world of distress.
Yeah. Had anybody else flagged it with you?
No.
Had anybody said it?
No one had a clue.
Nobody said
it. Not a clue. Because I was still eating 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
It was just super clean.
Yeah.
I was afraid to eat certain food types.
Yeah.
So no one would have flagged that it was an eating disorder or anything of the sort.
And you didn't physically look?
No, I was thin and I was stupidly lean. I'd probably gone a bit too thin, but not so thin whereby people are like, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So I was like, right, I need to try to fix this myself. This isn't right. That was an absolute shit show. Worse, like trying to fix that without psychological support because it had become a psychological issue at this stage. So I kind of then fell into this habit where this pattern of kind of, one thing people don't talk a lot about with eating disorders is the binging aspect of it. The kind of that binge restrict cycle that a lot of people go through. It's nearly like there's a weird sort of sense of shame when it comes to the binging thing, and it's like a badge of honor when it comes to the restriction thing, because you don't hear people talk about the binging aspect of it. And it's the one part of that whole documentary that went out on RT that I was part of that I probably wish maybe we as, like obviously myself and the other two guys were part of it and the production team or whatever, that we probably skipped over a little bit, and it probably didn't do justice to a lot of people who are suffering out there, is that kind of binging aspect of it as well, and that emotional eating aspect. But anyway, tried to fix it myself, ended up getting into this massive binge restrict cycle. So like throughout 2019, 2020, I'd started to cut out breakfast. So I'd have lunch and dinner. Then I eventually cut out breakfast and lunch. Lunch might be a packet of popcorn or a Vihi,
Jesus,
or a protein bar.
The drink, like?
Yeah.
Okay.
The crew in work would have seen it. I worked with a crew in Kappa Hospital who I was so lucky to have, because they kept me going on bad days when my head wasn't good. Now, they didn't know what was going on, but like I have 3 or 4 amazing friends and that I made up there, and 1 or 2 of my bosses who were so good to me that I'm still in contact with. that would have got me through days without even realizing, just by being good people. But like when I was in Kappa, some of the crew would have seen it. Like I'd go to the canteen and it'd be a Vihit and a packet of popcorn for lunch and just a black coffee in the morning. And they'd be looking at me and they'd be a bit like, but I'd just carry on as normal. But then inevitably you do that for 3 or 4 days, then eventually your body just craves food and you go and binge on whatever you can find at home for the night. And you just eat way too much, way too quickly, and you feel like crap. And then you have a panic attack the next morning, and then you go back into that restrict cycle. I then got kind of fast forward to 2021 then. January 2021 was when stuff really, really got bad. I moved down to Cork with my then girlfriend. We moved in together for a few months. And I suppose before that, I had gotten to the stage where, as I said, breakfast and lunch had been cut out. Dinner was turkey burgers and broccoli every night. 4 turkey burgers, a head of broccoli. That was all I'd eat. Maybe some baby potatoes, maybe. Same dinner every night. So then you move in with someone who's a bit of a foodie, and it's curry one night, it's burritos one night, it's fajitas the next night, it's lasagna, it's shepherd pie, it's whatever, chicken and pasta. Bear in mind, at this stage, no one in my life knew this was going on. At this stage, I knew something was messed up. Like by the start of 2021, when I moved down to Cork, in my head, I was like, this is messed up. Am I going insane? I was completely consumed by it. 95% of my thought process every day was, don't eat. Don't eat. You can't eat. If you eat, you're in trouble. Don't put on weight. Staring at myself in the mirror. I used to do this thing when I was in work before lunch, when I was working in Kappa Hospital. I wouldn't have eaten breakfast, and I'd be just about to go into the canteen, and there was a toilet on the ward. I'd run into the toilet on the ward. There was a mirror in there. Whip off my t-shirt. Look at myself. Not out of vanity, but just to be like, okay, you're okay. You can at least have the protein bar and the packet of popcorn, or the Vihit and the protein bar, or the Vihit and the packet of popcorn. Just to be like, okay, you can have that much. So no one knew what was going on. So different meals every night down in Cork. Eventually what would happen was I'd go to work and I'd be like, oh, I've had breakfast and lunch and work. Come home in the evening. I was trying to hide it from my partner at the time. So I'd have whatever would be cooked on the Tuesday or the Thursday night. But like inevitably I might be training or she might be training. So 2 nights a week we mightn't be together during the week. So I'd be like, oh yeah, I got something. Or I'd take food from the fridge while she was out, throw it in the bins at the back of the apartment complex and be like, leave dishes as if they'd been washed. So then that whole day, for example, if I'd managed to tell my dirty lies about dinner, I'd have gone a whole day without eating. And then the nights I did, what started happening then that brought it to a head was the nights I would have dinner, I'd keep it together, but the next morning I'd wake up and I'd have a panic attack. And that's when it started to show. Happened 2 or 3 times and I kind of pawned it off. I was like, oh, stuff at work, blah, blah, blah. She used to leave the house some mornings before me. So I remember the 3rd or 4th time it happened, she'd left the house and I'd had a panic attack and I rang my boss to call in sick for like the 3rd or 4th time. And I was just about keeping it together on the phone. Now at this stage, my whole world was consumed by this thing. I used to get bruises from pinching myself and I was just so confused. I was honestly in the headspace where I was like, I don't know what's wrong. I was like, oh, this isn't going to get better. Is this an eating disorder? It can't be an eating disorder. If I tell someone this, they're going to think I'm insane and put me somewhere. That's what I was thinking. I was so distressed, like so distressed. So I ran my boss anyway. I was like, oh, I can't come in today. And I was just, I don't know whether she heard it, my voice on the phone, or whether that woman, God love her, had just lost her son who was the same age as me about 6 months previous in pretty tragic circumstances. And I don't know whether it was that life event that made her more aware or whether there was a crack in my voice, but she was just like, Cormac, what's wrong? She was like, this, she didn't know me that long, but she was still like, this isn't like you. She was like, what is going on? I was like, I'm fine. I just don't feel it. And she kept pushing and I just cracked. And I told her and she was amazing. Brilliant. She was like, I don't want to see you. Get yourself back to Dublin. Talk to your parents. Mum and Dad didn't have a clue what was going on. Talk to your partner and get yourself the help you need. She was like, I do not want to see you. Keep me posted. Went back up to Mum and Dad. That was a Thursday. Went back up to Mum and Dad on a Friday and I told them. They knew I wasn't in great form when I was down in Cork, but they didn't know why. They just thought maybe relationship trouble or new job. They had no inkling that food was anything to do with it. Like 28-year-old son, 6'2", 90 kilos. They really weren't going to expect that food was a thing. Told them, they were like, what? And I was like, this has been going on for years. I was like, think about it. I was like, you saw me eating turkey burgers and broccoli every night for dinner. And every time I told you I was having lunch and breakfast and work, I wasn't. I was like, think about and stuff started to register with them. The behaviours, the protein bars, the popcorn, the Vihits, the 0-calorie drinks. One of the things I'm most embarrassed about, and it's one thing I haven't really ever shared, is one of the things I did to fill myself when I was starving was I drink litres and litres of like Coke Zero or Pepsi Max.
Just to try and give it a feeling of being full?
Full for about an hour or two. To the point where we're talking 4 or 5 litres a day.
Jesus.
Yeah. And to this day, I'm still paranoid that I've probably like destroyed my teeth. My dentist tells me I've kind of gotten away with it. But yeah, that's the sort of level of what I was doing. So told mum and dad, told my brothers and sisters. And I suppose when they really started to think about it, they were like, okay, maybe there is something in this. Went to the GP. Even my GP wasn't really sure. He was like, wasn't sure where to send me. Someone I knew had been in Lois Bridges before, so I knew Lois Bridges existed. So I said, there is this place. So he referred me there. And it ended up then, after a couple of weeks of assessment, stuff like that, ended up in Lois Bridges. But like even the day I did my assessment in Lois Bridges last June, went on for about an hour, and the consultant was just like to me, she was like, just give me a few minutes, left the room. I hand on heart went to that assessment thinking that they'd be like, oh yeah, you don't have an eating disorder, but you have issues there. We need 1 or 2 outpatient sessions a week. We'll fix this. She came back in with one of kind of the patient liaison support person that works there. And she was like, we want you to come into us. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, we want you to come in for at least 6 weeks as a resident. You stay here. You're here all day, every day. You don't leave. And I was like, what? She was looking me in the eye. She was like, you have an eating disorder. I was like, no, I don't. I was like, this is an overreaction. I don't need to be in here. I said some awful things then about people who are now some of my closest friends that I met in there and who are friends for life. I think I said something dreadful like, I don't belong in there with those headbangers.
Jesus.
Yeah, harsh like. And 2 or 3 of them are literally... We're like that now.
Yeah.
But I was in such a state of denial to the point where she sent me home. She was like, come back to me next week. She was like, go process what I'm telling you. She was like, you know this is true. I went back to her the week then after, and I still was refusing to go in as a resident. So they met me halfway, and they were like, right, you're hell-bent on not coming in, but if you don't come in, you're going to get worse. So they basically came to the agreement. They were like, okay, you're in here at 8 o'clock every morning. You're not allowed to leave till after your last meal in the evening. So whatever, 7 or 8. You're in here, have all your meals in here. You do all the therapy, same as the rest of the guys. The only difference is at 8 o'clock in the evening, you can go home, do what you want for an hour or two, go to bed and come back. But sure, I was so exhausted by the time I got home from all the therapy. I'd just go straight to bed and come back in the next morning. I may as well have went in. But that is 10 years of progression brought into, I don't know how long I've been rambling, 15 minutes or whatever. But yeah, that's how... Very gradual. So gradual. And that's the one thing I always try to get across when I'm talking about this is so many of the things I did those first few years are the things that there are thousands of people out there right now doing. And I'm not saying that they're going to turn into eating disorders, but I started off doing what tens of thousands of people are doing, and it led me down to a very, very distressed, confused path. But yeah, that's kind of 10 years of a lot of shit.
Yeah, no, look, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you telling your story. It's really powerful to hear you recount. How do you feel when you're telling that story now, sitting here?
It's still... I still at times find some aspects of it difficult to talk about. I really don't like how much I lied to people, and the amount, like thousands of lies to loved ones. I really don't like that. So there's a small degree of guilt with it being like, geez, now they were harmless white lies, and I don't hand on heart don't think any of them really harmed anyone. But yeah, a lot of kind of, God, I wish I hadn't told those lies. But then also a lot of kind of very grateful when I talk about it now, and the more when you talk about like that whole 10-year period, it kind of reminds you of just how bad things were. makes you very, very grateful to be in the headspace that I am in now. I also, when I talk about it, I find it hard to believe that I was in that headspace. Like when I think about it now, or I talk about it now, I can't figure out what I was doing to myself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm so far removed from it now. I'm like, I can't believe I actually behaved like that. You know? And it's still a bit strange. I think we'll always be a bit strange being the 29-year-old, 6'2" bloke that doesn't look like he has an eating disorder, that's talking about something that most people are terrified to talk about, and most people only associate with emaciated teenage girls.
Yeah, this is the really interesting thing to hear you speak and to watch that documentary and to follow your story, is because there's an expectation around eating disorders, and I know you've spoken about this before. There's a demographic that we associate with eating disorder. It's a young girl. She's massively underweight, and we've all probably, in some capacity in our lives, have had an experience with somebody like that. And we go, oh, that's terrible, that poor girl. But not personally myself, but I know several people who struggle with eating, and it's not limited to anything or anyone from what I've seen. And like the fact that, as you've mentioned a couple of times now, that you are kind of not the typical demographic. In fact, you're probably what most people would consider as the opposite end of the scale, because you're athletic and you're tall and you're male and you play sport, and all these different things mean that you couldn't possibly be unhealthy in any way. But it's a massive misconception. And why I think your story is really powerful is because it touches on another element of what's not spoken about a lot, which is male body image. And you talked a lot about being in the GAA environment, the sport environment, which is unforgiving when it comes to this, because there's almost an overcompensation, because I can almost guarantee you that most lads in a dressing room are struggling with their body image, but they deal with it in totally different ways. And most go through their entire life without ever admitting that they have some sort of issue with their body image or their psyche or their sense of masculinity or whatever it is. So to be able to speak about it from a position that you are is interesting, because you're not the typical representation that we see of people struggle with their eating. Did you deal with a lot of, I know your parents didn't know, your partner didn't know, nobody really knew. When you opened up and you went quite public by doing the documentary with RTE and you told your story and you shared this, what was the response and reaction from people that was unexpected? Because obviously you get a lot of support. I would hope you got a lot of support and people reaching out, because people are good. In my experience, people are really good, and when they know something is brought to their attention, they'll reach out. But did you have any unexpected reactions or responses?
Massively positive.
Yeah.
Didn't get any negative, and we're talking hundreds of people reaching out. Didn't get any negative. I got the yes and no. I got the kind of expected barrage of messages from kind of females saying they'd struggled too, and that they were appreciative of what me and the lads done, which I kind of expected, because more females do suffer from this. But this research would tell you that it's not as the difference in kind of ratios isn't as high as you believe. A lot of the research would actually say it's more like 4 or 5 to 1 rather than 10 to 1 females to males ratio. I didn't find it disheartening, but a little bit surprising that even still, with how much we all talked about it and how open I've been with it, is that if you kind of made a ratio of the amount of messages I received from females versus males, it still doesn't equate to what the research will tell you the eating disorder numbers are. I'd say messages I received females to males could have been 10 to 1. Research will tell you it's more like 4 or 5 to 1. And it really just showed me how ingrained that stigma is that even when there was the 3 of us talking about it, and all from slightly different backgrounds, and all of us probably living slightly different lives, that even still, you knew that there was men who were being able to kind of see themselves in us, and were also suffering with it, but still maybe weren't kind of, no, not that it requires, not that people reaching out to you is the sign of you making an impact, but I just thought there still might be a bit more. That probably took me a little bit of a surprise, and it probably just reinforced me just how stigmatized this thing is. I think females are probably a little bit better at being vulnerable, so I think we probably could have had the same effect on males versus females in terms of maybe pushing them to take action privately. But I suppose in terms of that kind of step to be maybe willing enough to put it out there or tell someone, we're probably slightly different beings in that regard. So maybe probably thought that the numbers would be a slight bit more even, considering we were 3 males talking about it, but even still, it wasn't really. But I do know that in the aftermath of it, there was some good did come from it. Like Lois Bridges set up a male support group online for men with eating disorders, and there was uptake there. I did have some men reach out, still plenty of men reach out to me kind of saying, look, thank you for doing what you did. I've suffered with X, Y, and Z. I guess maybe naively, I just thought there might be a few more. I didn't think there'd be the same disparity of ratios of contacts from females versus males. I thought it would be a bit closer.
Yeah. It's actually not surprising to me because, again, another topic I explore a lot, there is a definite crisis of masculinity at the moment. Yeah. It's happening as well with females, but a lot of men will view vulnerability as weakness, incorrectly view vulnerability as weakness. And while they might have resonated or connected with what you 3 guys did on the show, to admit it, number one, based off your story there, until a few years ago, you didn't even admit it to yourself. So True. Even if you saw it, you probably weren't going to admit it to anybody else because you're like, oh, that's terrible. I feel a bit like that, but I definitely don't have an eating disorder. You denied it until the last second in Lois Bridges. So that's one reason why it doesn't surprise me. And also, it's viewed as a weakness. You mentioned a lot about shame, and a lot of people who talk about any sort of body dysmorphia, eating disorders, anything like this, there's a huge amount of shame attached. I told you my story about alopecia earlier on as well. I know a massive amount of shame for being upset by it because I wasn't sick. I was ashamed because I wasn't sick, and people were like, oh my God, are you all right? I was like, I'm fucking fine. It's just hair. I'm not sick. And as I said, there's people who look like me who have cancer because they're going through treatment and I'm fine. I was ashamed of that, and I shouldn't have been ashamed of it. We view these things as weaknesses. So I'm not surprised that men haven't reached out. I guarantee you, like based off the stats you've said there, 4-1 instead of 10-1, a lot more men felt it than reached out. I guarantee that your message touched men. But I think that's why you doing this kind of thing is really important, because there has to be a consistent message there. To do one documentary is fine, and it's fantastic to do it, and it's great that it was on RTE and so many people saw it, but it's never going to be enough. Ever. There's never going to be enough people talking about this specific thing. And we can't all talk about everything. I have no experience personally with cancer, for example. So I can't talk about cancer all the time. But I can talk about the things that I have experience with, and other people might connect and resonate with that. And if we constantly just have the conversation, and even down to practical things, there's so many stats. When I was watching that documentary, I have a health background. I didn't know half the fucking stats that were coming up. It was freaky. The big one that hit me was the athletes one. 16 times more likely as an athlete to develop an eating disorder than as a man. And when I think about it, it kind of makes sense because there is a bit of a culture around food and body image around athletics, but 16 times more likely in the demographic you think have it all together because they're the jocks and they're the athletic ones and they're doing great. Stuff like that is crazy. The money that was committed and then didn't actually end up doing anything. Some of the statistics are crazy. Also, we hear eating disorder, the vast majority of people think anorexia, bulimia. Yeah. It's one or the other. If you're not anorexic or bulimic, you don't have an eating disorder. But we know it's a spectrum. It's a massive spectrum. Every stage of your 10 years was an eating disorder, but it was all just a scaled version of the previous, and we could all be on that spectrum at some point or another. So it's important we have awareness around it. Like all this type of stuff you're raising awareness around is so important. Really, really important.
Yeah, no, it is. And you've hit the nail on the head with the shame thing, because I was the guy who was too ashamed to kind of admit this and the confusion that went with it. So I think you are right there. I do know deep down that we probably did touch a lot more men with it than we realise. Yeah, it's a huge education piece. It's like anything. I think this whole world is probably a men and body image is probably where kind of the general mental health, anxiety, depression thing probably was 20 years ago. Yeah. At the turn of the millennium. I think that's probably where we are. I think it's going to take to really kind of turn it in terms of normalizing in the conversation. Yes, what we did was all well and good, but I think it's probably really going to take in this country a high level elite GA or rugby player or someone to come out, because I guarantee you there's one of them You take the 4 provinces, the national rugby team, and 32 inter-county teams. I guarantee you there's one of them out there. Definitely, no doubt in my mind. It will take someone like that to come out, because I think that would draw the level of attention that will be on a different level. But again, I think with men, it's such a slow burner. Like, I was listening to a really interesting podcast recently about sexuality in sport. And like, our female counterparts in terms of sexuality and being open about their sexuality are so far ahead of us. It's not even funny. They are light years beyond us in terms of the amount of females that are out about their sexuality and really normalising the conversation. Whereas in the GA world and the rugby world, it's virtually non-existent. And again, statistically, it would tell you that there's plenty there. Now, I'm not saying that everyone has to be open and about these things, but I just think sometimes when someone leads from the front like that, it can help change the conversation. Me, Daniel, and Owen are just 3 normal blokes. We only have so much of a stranglehold on kind of what people will pay attention to. And again, so I think it will take time. And again, the other thing I often really feel like obliged to point out when I talk about this is I am doing the easy work on this. I talk about this stuff. I don't mind talking about it. Yes, there's a purpose to it, but like, I'm not ringing my local politicians. I'm not harassing councillors. I'm not trying to get in front of the Oireachtas Health Committee. I'm not lobbying politicians. I'm not working for policy change. I'm not trying to get the structures in place. That's the really unglamorous work that there are parent groups, Bodywise, all these people doing to try and get real ground level change at grassroots level. I'm not doing any of that. Like, I'm doing a very easy, superficial stuff, talking about it. So I'm always hesitant.
Yeah.
I'm always hesitant to, someone said to me a few weeks ago, she was like, you're basically like the face of Bodywise. Like, if I hear Bodywise, I think of you. And I was like, or eating disorders, I think you. I was like, if you think of me when you hear eating disorders, that's completely the wrong thing. Like, you should be thinking no services available, 16 specialist eating disorder hubs that were promised to us years ago and only 3 or 4 have been set up. I'm very, very quick to point out that the stuff I'm doing is very, very easy. Talking about it is easy work. It's cheap work.
I'll take a different slant on that, right? I'm not disagreeing with you. I do agree that there are other things that can be done. However, I have quite a cynical view of structures and systems. I believe they're extremely important. I'm very grateful they exist, and I'm very, very grateful for the people that work within the systems. And when I say the systems, I mean healthcare systems, clinics, governmental systems. I believe people are good, trying to do their best. I just think that the most effective change, I believe, will come from us, from us helping each other, educating each other. For example, by you speaking about, I'm just using you as an example here, but you speaking about this stuff. If somebody listens to this podcast, one of the many podcasts you've been on, or one of the many bits of media you've contributed to with your own story, you're going to help people understand a little bit more about the condition. In my experience with a lot of these systems and structures that we try and put money into, and they're so broad that they don't really help an individual. They don't really meet a person where they're at. Now, again, this is not a comment on the people who work in these systems, but they don't really meet the individual where they're at. They provide a bit of support and a bit of structure for people. But if I have a brother or a son or a friend as a male who's struggling, or a female who's struggling with an eating disorder, and they can listen to something like this or follow your journey or learn something about themselves, or they start to become a bit more empowered. And if they're a bit more empowered, they can take an active role in their own care as well. And I think that's massively important, because this is the approach I took with health in general. I tried to help empower people, not necessarily with eating, with everything about their health. If I could help them with something about their health, I wanted to do that. It's why I do this podcast. It's why you're here right now, because you're going to help me understand this more. You have to this point. And by extension, potentially the listeners are going to understand, and somebody will gain some knowledge or benefit from that, and we can drive change there.
No, 100%.
So there, yes, I think both things are important. I think we do need that change from a structural top-down level. I've very little faith in that system. I've very little faith in, there's no incentive. We've seen it with the numbers and figures that were thrown around that documentary. Money's promised, it never shows up, because it doesn't make anybody money. There's no incentive unless you personally have skin in the game, somebody who struggles, somebody who's really suffering. There's very little incentive for a system or structure to really focus on when there's millions of different avenues for people suffering, or millions of different diseases or illnesses or disorders. It's very, very hard to get people to focus on one thing. But in your community, if you develop a community of people and you're sharing information and you can drive personal and individual and group empowerment that way, I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle that isn't talked about a lot. And I think that's where you're very, very valuable. So you are doing a massive, massive service to the community, even though you mightn't be doing the other things. And you've raised 150 grand.
Yeah.
For charities, it might not necessarily be directly going towards this, but that's a lot of money to raise and a lot of personal time and effort to put into something, even though, as we said at the start, you're getting personal gain out of that too. Hey, that's fine. So I just wanted to clarify that. I agree with you, but I also think it's another avenue.
And I get what I do get what you're saying. I think it's more so just I at times get uncomfortable with some of the praise that's kind of directed towards us when I know there's loads of just lay people who work normal jobs, who do lots of extra stuff at the weekends for kind of support groups, parents groups, kind of doing charity work for Bodywise. That I'm just very conscious that like there's plenty of those people, hundreds of them, who don't get any pay or thanks for it, that have been doing it for years.
Yeah.
And
they're amazing.
And they're inspirational
too.
And there's myself, Daniel, and Owen, just because it was on TV, get a bit of extra praise or associate it a bit more. That's really more so kind of what I mean. But it's like anything. There's people at grassroots doing these things in every cause and every, and I suppose,
let's use someone you spoke about earlier on, Connor. Let's use Connor. Connor has built a community, and he's using that community to do good. So maybe he's not out lobbying the local TD, but he's doing this event for himself and his own personal growth, and he's leveraging that. He's leveraging the modern community and systems and platforms to raise money for Pieta House, and that's an amazing thing.
And I would never view Connor in the way of, or what he's doing in the way that I just spoke about myself.
Yeah.
I wouldn't look at it that way. I wouldn't be like, well, he's not writing letters. I'd never think of it that way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's not how people look at you. Yeah. It's not how I look at you. I can't speak for people. It's not how I look at you. So what I'm trying to say here is what you're doing is massively important, and it's highlighting areas that we don't get from the TV generally, you're highlighting the human story of it. And it's important.
It probably goes back to, it nearly kind of fits in with that can't see, can't be thing, like in an opposite way with kind of the female sport. And I suppose, if we all need someone to look at to be able to be like, well, they came through that, or they had the same thing.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question about the male sport environment as well, because there's a weird kind of conundrum here. You mentioned throwaway comments, which are part and parcel of most dressing room environments. There's that kind of, some people call it banter, some people call it throwaway comments, and there are going to be people who get hurt by things that are said in those environments. What is your take as somebody who has been hurt by something that was said, most likely in a benign manner?
Yeah.
What's your take on that whole system? Because there's loads of different arguments being thrown around here. And it's hard to listen to some of the arguments, because some people say we shouldn't say anything because you could offend everybody. Some people say you should say what you want and people should toughen up. And I don't agree with either one of those extremes. It's difficult though.
I really, really struggle with it.
Yeah.
Sport in all its forms is a competitive thing. So the ego comes into it. We all want to win. Which is probably why I'm not really playing as much anymore, because getting the better of a bloke on the pitch, beside me on the pitch, like getting the better of him doesn't do anything for me anymore, which is probably why I don't really play as much as I used to. I admittedly am probably a little bit over the top slightly in my views. And it's probably a bit of a projection again. When it comes to that environment and some of the stuff that gets said, I just wish people would just be a bit more aware. Like, there's certain things that get said on a pitch and in a dressing room where I'm just like, there is absolutely no need for that whatsoever. Like, it's a personal attack, you know. Where I struggle with it is that I think so much of it comes from a place whereby it's not real. And I think that's where, I get annoyed, is when it's fake or it's excessive bravado for the sake of it. Because I've been in those dress rooms where that goes on, and that creates a culture whereby someone can't be vulnerable. And I'm not saying that there can't be any bit of crack or fun or whatever. Of course there has to be. That's what kind of builds connection with people. but it's a very fine line. I think if you can get to a place where you can have a dressing room or a collective where it just doesn't turn that bit toxic, or there's no... I think once you can form an environment where there's no shame in being vulnerable, or that people have been openly vulnerable, well then I think any issues that you get with the slagging or the banter goes on kind of goes away pretty quickly. Or I think then all of a sudden it's less problematic. But it's very, very difficult. Like I remember, like I've managed under 21 teams in the club, like, and really tried to make it a safe space for everyone. But at the same time, you don't want to be the PC police either. Like they're young men, and you hold them to account. And anyone who's played under me will tell you, I hold them to a moral standard and to a certain level of moral code. But at the same time, there has to be an element whereby people learn themselves how to be themselves and what's right and what's wrong. And look, stuff that goes on in that sporting world and stuff that goes on the pitch, yeah, it's fine margins. Even now I'm rambling a bit, and I'm trying to get my head straight on it, because I've been there on a pitch where in the heat of the moment you say something that you shouldn't have said. And it doesn't make it right. But like, we all know people who are the loveliest people outside the 4 white lines. And we all know certain people who are like, he goes inside 4 white lines and he changes.
Yeah, you're looking at one right here.
You know?
Yeah.
And can you judge someone's character on that? No, you can't.
Yeah.
You know, because none of us are perfect as human beings. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone says stuff. Everyone does things that we shouldn't do. So I'm very, very hesitant to come down stupidly hard on people. But at the same time, I think depending on what the subject matter is, you need to be careful about what you say to people. And that there is a degree of responsibility, more so with your own than with the opposition, if that makes sense. If you're saying something in a dressing room amongst your own, I think that carries way more weight than if you're playing against a bloke and he says something to you. I think you can wash that off a lot quicker. The only things that ever bothered me in a sporting environment were stuff that were said to me by my own. Not really from the opposition, because you can kind of wash it off heat in a moment. You're like, oh, he's an arsehole.
Yeah.
I'm rambling there now, I'm sorry.
You're not rambling. I'm grinning here like a dope, because your answer again is so rare nowadays, because you didn't spout some ideological bullshit and pick a side and just ram that. Like, this is my view and this is what it is. There's nuance to what you're saying.
There's grey in everything.
There's nuance to what you're describing here. It's a really difficult situation and there is no right answer. And I think you've used some really important words there. Context is what I'm getting from you. Context is everything. Creating safe space for people to feel vulnerable is extremely important. And then it was like magic. I was thinking of what I was going to say next and you took the words out of my mouth. Because when I know that everybody in this dressing room is vulnerable with me and we're here for each other, and we don't have to all be best mates, but there's an agreement that we're all here as to hold space for each other. And I know that sounds a little bit airy-fairy, but in the context of the sport, we're all here to support each other. Then the bit of slagging, we know where it's coming from. We understand the context and we embrace it because it's banter. It means we're connecting. It's fun. When we don't feel that sense of connection and safe space, and well done for trying to create that for the younger teams, when we don't feel that, everything is a personal attack. And if you're sensitive or vulnerable to that, it's going to stick. It's going to hurt. You're going to bring it home. You're going to obsess over it and think about it because the context is different. And the reason why some fella on the pitch can say it to you is because it's irrelevant. Anything that he says is irrelevant. And you shake hands, you never see him again at the end of the game. Like, it's irrelevant. But when somebody in your inner circle says it to you, they've taken advantage of a situation that you've created together. We're all supposed to be in this together and he's saying these things. Why is he saying these things? So what you've said there is brilliant. It really is brilliant. And we're using a GAA dressing room here. In my opinion, it's a petri dish example of how the world should be. We should be able to create space for each other in our families and our communities because nowadays this is outrage culture and everyone's offended by everything, but it's because the context is off. We don't have that sense of connection with each other. So fair play to you for understanding that, first of all, and for actively trying to create that, because I think it's such... Eating disorders, I'm not an expert in. I'm not an expert in anything, actually, but I think a lot about the human psyche and human psychology and how we go down these roads, because I spent 2 years in a really dark place in my own head. And I know most people I know have had a similar journey, and some people talk about it and some people don't. But I'm fascinated by how this happens and why this happens and why we feel isolated. Like you mentioned this as well, by feeling alone, why we feel ashamed, why we feel embarrassed. We don't have that sense of community. We don't have a feeling of it's a safe space to be vulnerable and explore these feelings. So my belief is a lot of this stuff goes away, or at least gets managed way better, if we create a better environment. And we can start that in the dressing room. We can start that with our friends and family. We can start that with our mate, who we kind of have spent the last 20 years. We know him really well. We're always ribbing each other, but it kind of hurts a little bit. And you're always kind of comparing yourself against them because you've never actually set the stall out with each other. Look, pal, I'm going to be vulnerable with you. You be vulnerable with me. And then you become closer than you've ever become in your entire life. So a lot of the negative self-talk, the comparison, the absorbing those throwaway comments as real life daggers, a lot of it goes away when we create these safe spaces. So I think that's a really, really good insight that you have there. But it's very hard to get that across in a high performance, a high performance environment, or any performance environment.
Extremely different,
especially with men.
And and it's the grey in everything, and everyone behaves how they do for a certain reason. You know, all of us as human beings, we're all products of our experiences and our environments and our genetics as well. So we all behave how we do for a certain reason, and that's not to completely absolve anyone of their behavior. But I think the day we start, and this is not me trying to excuse the behavior of we're talking about men because we're two men, and this is the environment we know. So we can't talk, we don't know female dressing rooms, so we can't talk about that. But in terms of what we know and the experience we had, I'm not trying to absolve some of the stuff that goes on. But at the same time, every single person is a product of their behavior, their environment, their upbringing, their life circumstances. And I'm just I see it in schools, when I go into schools and I'm doing talks in schools, the amount of times you'll meet teachers beforehand and they'll be like, oh, we've 3 or 4 bad eggs in this now they're gonna act up, you know, they're gonna cause problems here now. They're lost causes. And I'm looking at them and being like, you're actually calling a 17-year-old a lost cause. Why don't you try to figure out why he's acting like that? Why is he kicking up a fuss in Irish history class when he's learning about Wolfe Tone? Because the bloke, that's the last thing on his mind at the moment, because his man and dad are fighting every night at home. He's turning to drink. His mates are all acting like they're shit hot and we're all deadly blokes, and none of them are having any real connection with each other. Every single person in this world behaves how they do for a reason. So I'm always so hesitant to just tarnish someone.
Yeah.
I think it's a very dangerous road to go down, to just tarnish someone immediately. Yes, okay, if a pattern becomes and you try and engage and there's help offered and they push away or whatever, maybe then, yeah. But like, judging people off moments, often off single moments of madness and on a football field or in a dressing room or whatever, I don't know. I just think it can be slightly unfair, especially if you don't take the context of what that person grew up in and is surrounded by. It can just be, it's tricky. Like, you just need to be, if you write off everyone straight away, well then they're going to believe that they're a lost cause anyway. You're never going to get anything good from them.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, again, demonstrating that vulnerability to that person or that support, or showing them that it's safe to be or to express whatever they need to express, is really, really important. Like, that 17-year-old kid has probably only ever had people telling him he's a bollocks. And no one ever saying, look, Pat, is everything okay? Like, and repeatedly given the opportunity to, and like, there's something going on with him, obviously. There's something going on with everybody who's expressing something, some sort of negative trait. So yeah, again, it is just that nuance, that grey space you talk about. There is no bad person, good person. There's a collection of traumas or behaviours or baggage or history or something going on that's led this person to do a specific thing. And rather than trying to target the behaviour, it's the underlying stuff that we need to deal with. And these conversations I have, they always circle back around to this. They always circle back around, which again is why I'm so interested and impressed with your clarity as well. Because if an individual, there's a couple of ways of looking at this. If someone says something to me in a dressing room now, I am so comfortable with the way I see myself at the moment. I'm not in any shape or form developed the finished product or anything like that, but I'm really comfortable with how the work I'm doing on myself. And I know where my kind of insufficiencies are and all the stuff I'm trying to work on. I'm going deep into that and I'm working on that. So when someone says something to me, I'm like, it doesn't really mean anything at all to me. But the next person, it could mean everything to that person. So again, I can't just say, we should all just have a solid mindset and work on ourselves and we'll be fine and nothing will upset you, because everyone's in a different space. And when you've got a dressing room, you've got 30, 40 people in that room, they're all going to be, as you said, completely different based on their own experiences. So we can't just have a sweeping rule, say whatever you want, lads just need to toughen up. But we also can't say nothing. It's a different question we need to be asking, like what's the environment like? Is there space for people to do this? I want to ask you a practical question. If there is somebody listening and they have someone in their life who is struggling with, for example, an eating disorder, but something along these lines where they're caught in their own head, it's been recognized or identified. There's many wrong ways to approach this many wrong ways, especially with eating disorders. I know you can add fuel to that fire. Most people mean well. There's the old Irish mammy trying to get you to eat more because you're getting skinny. There's your mate saying, come on, will you just get over it? Like it's only in your head. There's a million different ways to do it wrong that are meant right. Do you know, like what's a good way to approach this to show support for somebody who might be struggling?
Okay. First off, I am the furthest thing from an expert on this. Yeah. Right?
In your experience?
In my experience, the biggest mistake you can make is pushing too hard. So ultimately, the thing with eating disorders is, from my experience anyway, is that person won't get better until they're ready to get better. There's such strange illnesses because they can create such a stranglehold, and someone can want to get better, but then also not want to get better. And both those things can coexist at once, right? So let me get that out. But for someone to get better, there has to be at least a part of them that's willing to let go of the disorder, willing to let go of the behaviors. So ultimately what I'm saying there is ultimately a part of it has to come from the person, or at least in my experience, that's what I think. So you can't push too hard. And if you think that pushing and pushing and pushing, you'll eventually beat them down and they'll eventually be like, right, they're pushing so hard, I'm going to have to get better. And that's not how it is. Push a little, a tiny bit, extend the olive branch. If they don't bite, back off. Because the one thing I will tell you will do, if you keep pushing and pushing and make comments on what someone's eating, tell them they're looking X, Y, or Z, tell them they're not eating enough, tell them, come on, you need to start doing something about this, snap out of it. You will drive them away further into the depths of the eating disorder, and there ain't no getting them back.
And you can ruin the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And you get rid of trust. Trust is a massive thing in eating disorder recovery. Trust is huge. You can start off, again, take all this with a pinch of salt, please, anyone that does listen to this. You could start off and say, if you're, I don't know, a friend, I've just noticed maybe you weren't just eating as much as you were before. Is everything okay? Is there stuff going on in work? Are you stressed? Oh, no, I'm fine. It's definitely nothing wrong. Don't be worrying about it. Oh, yeah, grand, but you know where I am if you ever want to talk. Yeah. I know, you're fine. And leave it. Like we're talking that level of stuff, like back off. A degree of it has to come. You can try again in another couple of weeks maybe, but it has to be very, very gentle approach. Because I know with me, my dad used to get me out of jail so many times. My mom used to, I don't know, she didn't think I had an eating disorder, but she knew something was up at times to a degree, because she'd be like, oh, would you not have a bit of bread with that, or a bit of rice with that, or come on, like you're only skin and bone. And she'd be pushing a bit like in her Irish mammy way, and I'd get defensive. I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, as in, I was so wired wrongly. I'd be like, look at the peppers and the broccoli, there's carbohydrates in that, what are you on about? Like, a proper defensive. And then my dad, who had no awareness of eating disorders whatsoever, I didn't have a clue that his son could possibly have one, used to be like, because he'd see me get frustrated and he wouldn't want to fight in the house. He'd be like, Carol, would you leave him alone? Like, no one ever dies of hunger anymore in this country.
Carol, Daddy did the rest of it.
He used to get me out of jail, and then she'd stop.
Yeah.
But her pushing was driving me away. It nearly make me eat less and less. So on a very practical level, push a tiny bit, but very, very gently. Do not make the mistake of pushing too hard, or you'll push them away. And again, there's one thing I won't ever do is bullshit anyone. I don't really know after that.
Yeah. But that's excellent advice. And again, it would line up to what I would think. Again, I don't have personal experience with an eating disorder, but with most of these situations that exist inside a person's head, there is an attachment to the behaviors you've built as well. You've built a set of behaviors that either empower you or make you feel safe. Someone challenges those behaviors, it feels like they're challenging the core of who you are as a person. And I know what that feels like, because I didn't have an eating disorder, but I had bad behaviors that if someone challenged me on a behavior, fuck me, I was like a dragon. Get ready for battle here, because you're challenging me and it's defensive straight away. So that's really is excellent advice, and it would line up with what I would think would be the right approach. You need to do something and exhibit that you're there for support, but not press on here.
And the only other thing I would say is, if someone was listening to this and a loved one was suffering, is that don't pin too much. If you're thinking, if it's a loved one we're talking about, and you don't know what you're doing or if you're doing the right thing, one thing I would say is, don't pin too much of it on yourself. In terms of, I should be doing more, I should be helping them more. Like, really don't pin too much of it on yourself. And I don't mean this in a really negative or hopeless way, but when it comes to something as ingrained as an eating disorder, trust me when I say this, there's only so much you can do. And I don't mean that on a hopeless front. I mean that just in terms of looking after you and yourself as well, which is important too. I know it's a different level as a worried parent, but there is only so much you can do. Again, as I said, a significant degree of recovery ultimately has to come from the individual. And sometimes some of us are lucky enough whereby we're able to, whatever is going on in their mind or whatever way the eating disorder works, we're able to get that couple of % of wanting to get better that opens the door for us. Some people are so unlucky that window never seems to open. But there's such ingrained things that there is only so much you can do. So that's the other thing I'd say is, if you are trying to support a loved one, don't turn it on yourself or go into the blame game, because chances are that person being slow to get better or not getting better at all at the moment, as much as you might think it's not to do with you or what you're doing.
Yeah. And you used the words getting better there, because something I've heard quite commonly is it's never really gone. What's your thoughts on that?
My thought has kind of changed on it gradually. Like when you're in recovery, they do tell you they're like full recovery is possible. Like they will tell you.
Okay, wow, I didn't know
they
that.
say it could take up to 7 years. 7 years is kind of the time. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of the time frame they give you. But
that's interesting.
They do say it is possible. I'll put it this way. This time last year, 18 months ago, I was a different person to who I am now. Like I was really in the shit. My 95% of my day was consumed by this thing. I was miserable. I never thought I'd get out of it. I never thought it could get better. It's flipped on its head by 95%, whereby 95% of the day now, I'm at peace. I don't really think about food too much. I don't think about calories. I fuel myself well. I'm able to go out and have a croissant and a coffee with my mates and not have a panic attack and still eat my lunch 2 hours later. Last night I was sitting there after dinner at 9 or 10 o'clock. I had my dinner. I'd had a packet of jelly tots that I had, and then I got to 11 o'clock at night and I was still hungry, and I had a big bowl of cornflakes and honey. And
I love a bowl of cornflakes and honey.
And then I was like, I'm still hungry, so I made myself a protein shake with a litre of milk and had a bar of chocolate. And I would never have done that before, like not in a million years. So when I say it's flipped on its head for me, it has. And I have a quality of life again that I never imagined would be possible. But do I ever envisage a day where I can walk into a chipper, get a bag of chips and a burger, and not have some little voice in my head? I'm not so sure. Or do I ever envisage a day where I won't be a bit self-conscious about my body image? I'm not so sure. Like the behaviors have pretty much gone. The body image is still a bit of a work on. Yeah. To be honest, that's a tough nut to crack. And I think even people who don't have eating disorders struggle with body image.
Oh yeah.
I think that's a bit of something we all have. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll ever get to a place whereby I don't give a second thought to food or what I look like or anything like that. But having said that, I don't know if many people have that.
Yeah, and it's a great point, because if there's people listening now, that last thing that you said there is most people go into a chipper and have a burger and they feel a bit shit and guilty, and they're kind of pinching the bit of fuck up bollocks as if the burger went straight to the fucking fat and the gut. Like that is most people. However, to not diminish or undermine the seriousness of an eating disorder, it's very quickly, with the right triggers and the right set of circumstances, that could very quickly turn into something else. And the something else is an eating disorder. And that is real. I don't want to undermine or diminish that at all, because most people have issues with body. Most people have issues, not issues with food, but think about food. And especially now, there's a massive drive for keto, clean eating, low carb, eliminate sugar, all this kind of stuff. And there's merit to some of that in a healthy context. And this word health is massively important to me, because it doesn't mean healthy food. It means your mindset when you approach insert thing here: exercise, food, self-care, relationships. That's where it can be healthy or unhealthy. And every single one of these things can be healthy or unhealthy. Alcohol, believe it or not, can be healthy in the right context if it improves your relationships. Probably won't improve your relationship if you're drinking loads of alcohol. It's not a direct trade-off. But what I'm trying to say here is, anyone who's listening and saying, well, that's me, sure, I don't have an eating disorder, I feel a bit bad about food. That's true, but there's a different context here. And it's not the same thing, although it's similar.
No. I think the thing that they generally say, the thing that differentiates it is there a compulsion?
Yeah.
And is it anxiety inducing? They're the two key elements. And does it induce anxiety, the thought of eating that or eating that? And do you then get a compulsion to not eat it, or a compulsion to compensate in some way, shape or form?
Okay.
They generally say that kind of anxiety, fear-inducing element, or a compulsion to do X, Y, or Z is where it comes into it. So I would still occasionally get small little spikes in anxiety that I'm able to ignore. I won't never get compulsions anymore. I used to get this massive compulsion to not eat, but I still need to watch it. And it's probably something I'll always need to stay on top of. It's like I was saying to you earlier, you asked me, do you think you'll go back playing? I have this itch at the moment to go back playing senior hurling with my club. And one of the significant reasons why I don't think I'm going to do it is because the last time I played senior hurling with my club, I was spending the week of a game too obsessed with my body composition and trying to eat less. And my health has come on so much the past year that I'm concerned that if I went back playing senior hurling or football, that I'd become too obsessive and paranoid about it, and that I'd slip back into behaviours. So I just don't think it's worth it.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of a price to pay, considering it's a sport I love. But that's my point. I don't know if it will ever fully go away. Will it ever rear its head again whereby someone notices? I don't think so with the hold I have on it now. But will it still rear its head in that kind of 1% fashion in my head, where there's a little voice in my head and I have to kick it down the road and be like, shut the fuck up, get out of there? I think I'll always probably live with a little part of that. But I don't think anyone, if I keep doing what I'm doing now, no one will ever notice it.
Yeah.
But it will still be there a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it's always going to be there a little bit.
I think that's such a valuable thing to have, which is another thing I can pull out of your story, is that awareness. I can apply that awareness to other things in my life. Be aware of certain things I know are going to end in me exhibiting behaviours I don't want to exhibit, or going down routes I don't want to go down. To have that awareness, even though it might stop you from playing football, because if you didn't have that awareness, you go back playing ball or go back playing hurling. But that awareness is a very valuable tool to have.
But you know what the interesting thing about this is, right? I don't mean to sound pessimistic when I say that, or to be hopeless for anyone who has an eating disorder, because let me say again, my life has flipped. I have a quality of life again that I never thought would exist.
Yeah.
And I genuinely feel like I'm thriving at the moment. But I think what I just said is the same and is true for pretty much the majority of all mental health conditions.
Yeah.
I don't think silver bullets exist.
No.
And that's not to be pessimistic about it. It's just it's the reality of the human condition. Bad shit happens. Bad events happen. We get into bad mindsets in our mind because we're such intelligent creatures, maybe. And we learn to take control of them again. We learn to live with them and to thrive even with them, despite them. And they're that thing we get to a certain stage where it's that thing that's in the corner of our mind that we know can become a bit of a beast if we let it. So we keep it locked up and we do whatever work we need on the side to make sure that it stays in that cage, whether it's regular psychotherapy or counselling, or
we confront it.
We confront it
head on,
sometimes as well. I think that's the reality of the human condition. Yeah. I don't know if there's any mental health condition whereby someone is just like, yep, suddenly I'm healed. Right, no. That's it, back to normal life.
Yeah.
Everyone has their shit.
100%, yeah. That's kind of what I'm getting at when I say that awareness. It can be applied to so many different things. Yeah. And again, another gem of wisdom out of you, because it is not a secret or a silver bullet, but it is one of the most effective ways of like most people are familiar with the word depression, and a huge amount of people were classed themselves as being depressed. And I know obviously there's levels of clinical depression and stuff like that as well. But most people are aware of if they acknowledge how they're not feeling good and they take some actions, it could be taking care of your body, your health, your relationship, whatever, they start to feel better. And the more they do that, the better they feel. So they generate an awareness around doing things that make them feel good and avoiding things that make them feel bad. Same thing. Same thing. If you don't do those things, you let it, you kind of turn your back on it, you kind of go blind a little bit, it's going to come back and it's going to push you back down into that dark hole. And whatever behaviors you tend to exhibit when you're not feeling good, you'll exhibit those behaviors. Could be drink, could be drugs, could be anything. It could be an eating disorder. So it's that level of awareness is so powerful. And it is a big lesson to pull out of your story. What are the plans going forward? Any more mad cycles? Cycle up Kilimanjaro or something?
Mad cycles. It's been refreshing not talking about the cycle.
Yeah, like I said at the start here, like I know I go rambling off in these podcasts, but I'm interested in you and your mindset, and you've come out with some gems there that are really, really, I won't use the word again. I won't use that word. It makes you uncomfortable. They're really, really impressive. And I resonate a lot with them and are very valuable. And the cycling is a very impressive thing that you've done as well. I just fucking hate cyclists. I don't want to talk about them.
Anyone could do, anyone. Absolutely. No one believes me when I say this. Absolutely anyone could do that cycle. Anyone.
But they don't.
One, because
they don't. Many people can do many things.
Do you know what that cycle was built on? That cycle was built on nothing but unglamorous consistency and persistence of average efforts.
And what do most people lack? Consistency.
There was nothing about that was exceptional.
The consistency was exceptional. To be able to do something, anything, consistently takes discipline and effort. And even though you mightn't think it does, it definitely does. And that's why most people haven't cycled across America. It can be done. Most people could do it. Most people could do amazing things. But we limit ourselves.
But I think it's because of the way social media is gone and the way the world is gone. People see these things and they're like, oh my God.
It's out of reach.
Wow, it's out of reach.
Yeah.
I trained my backside off for 2 years. But when I genuinely say, I don't know if I did one 10 out of 10 session, probably didn't even do a 9 out of 10 session, a few 8 out of 10s. Majority of my training sessions, 6 out of 10s, maybe 7 out of 10s. Continuous, unglamorous, boring consistency of cycling in circles around the Phoenix Park. That's all it was built on.
You ask me, people say to me sometimes about this whole primal thing on the podcast, the business, all that kind of crap. They're like, oh my God, it's all amazing, it looks cool, it's so different, all that kind of stuff. And you asked me when you came in here, like, how did you do that? Same thing. Most of my days are 6 out of 10s. And I talk all the time about like setting up a good daily schedule routine and hitting the next best thing. Most of my days are 6 out of 10s. That's how this thing came to be. Many, many times I thought it was falling on its ass, it's failing, it's not doing anything. Everyone thought it was class. But over the last 4 years, it's just been the 6 out of 10s have made it. Things have happened because I've just done the last 6 months of work or grind or whatever it might be, and none of it's exceptional. I'm not exceptional in any area of what I do here. I've just been able to be consistent.
There's two factors. Every quote unquote great thing that people do is built off two things: consistency / persistence, and being brave enough to try in the first place. And that's the other one that people are. One of my mentors, who's been exceptionally good to me over the years, said to me, he was like, I hope you're proud of what you did. And I was like, I'm really not proud of the physical effort. I'm telling you, anyone could have done it, and I genuinely mean that. But I said, I'm proud of the fact that I was brave enough to go against the societal norm and go against the grain and to try. Because that's the thing with most, and it drives me insane. The amount of people since I got home have been like, I'd love to do that, or I'd love to try this.
This is what I'm talking about.
And I'm like,
can you not feel that when your mentor says that? That's what he's saying. He's not necessarily saying, maybe he doesn't even understand what he's saying, but he's not saying the fact that you were able to pedal your legs for that amount of days was impressive. Yeah, that is impressive because you have to train to do it. That you managed to put the whole thing together. You were consistent enough to arrange that thing, to train for it, to actually do it, to be brave enough to do it. Puts you in the 1%.
But people put up their own excuses, which is what
I agree with you. I'm agreeing with you here.
Because,
but I'm saying you need to apply that to yourself as well.
I know, and it is the one. It's the one aspect that I am proud of the whole thing is that I was just brave enough to go against the grain and do it. But like people say, "Oh, I wish I could do that," and I'm like, "Why?" I always ask. I'm like, "Right, tell me why you can't do it." Well, like I can't really give up the job. Can you not give up the job? When you say you can't really, why can't you give up the job? You have your degree, you have your master's. Oh, then I'd have to get a new job. Okay, great. There's work out there. You can get a new job, so you can take that 2 or 3 months. Oh no, I can't. Well, like. Money's a bit tight. You were at Cheltenham last week. You were in McGowan's on Saturday. You're going to be in McGowan's next Saturday.
Yeah.
What's the story with the new shoes you just bought? Like, people look at me, people often be like, how did you manage to do that? And I was like, right, well, I took 2 months unpaid leave from work. I haven't bought new nice clothes in probably 2 years because I don't value them. You know, I share my car with my ma, which means, well, my ma shares her car with me, which means occasionally when I need the car, I don't have it, so I'll walk or I'll bus it.
Yeah.
You know? I'm still living at home. My point is, there's always ways and means to do these things. Except people put up the I can't or the barriers or
it's a mindset.
It's a mindset.
It's a mindset.
Like, I took 8 months out of my career last year to work on myself to get better, and then I took 2 months off. My career hasn't been set back at all. If anything, I'm a more rounded therapist since I come back. You know, and it just drives me a little bit mad when people put up these barriers. Like, there was 1,000,001 reasons why I shouldn't. I have a pacemaker. I'm just recovering from an eating disorder. COVID, pandemic. I just got out of treatment 10 days and then I went out and cycled across Europe. I had every reason to not do it. I got home then 6 months later and went across America. We can give ourselves all the reasons we want to not do things. And it just drives me a little bit insane when people are like, I wish. You can. Anyone can. You left a whole career and set up a whole completely new business and life choice in an area that you admit that you weren't even sure you knew much about.
Yeah.
And now look at it. Like, it's just being willing to be consistent, being willing to stick with that unglamorous side that people don't like knowing, but that's the reality of most big things, and then just being brave enough to try. I think everyone's so caught up in the rat race. And it's fine being caught up in the rat race if career is your thing and if all you want out of life is, I like my job, I want to work hard, I want the big house and I want the car and I want to go out the weekends. If that hand on heart is all you want from life, I shake your hand and be like, well, you know what you want, keep doing it. But what drives me a little bit insane is the amount of people I know who are like, oh, I have to go into work tomorrow, I hate this. I want to take 6 months off and go traveling. Okay, why can't you? And they don't have a reason most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's...
and it all goes back to time. I'm looking and I'm like, your time is going to run out.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what's coming down the line.
And it's a cliche, that deathbed thing is a cliche, but again, people are waiting for the jolt, the heart attack. There's something to happen to inspire them to do it. And I ask this question a lot. You've already answered it. Do you believe people have a choice? Because life can be difficult. And my personal belief is the exact same as yours. We definitely have a choice. And I use the example of if you're a poor farmer in Vietnam and you literally are living hand to mouth every day, you don't have as many choices, but you still do have choices about how you live your life and how you treat other people and the decisions you make every single minute of every day. But me and you and most of the people listening to this podcast,
that's what I mean. Yeah.
And that's what I refer to sometimes, because sometimes I have to clarify this. Yeah. People get a little bit annoyed.
Yeah, I'm not saying people in Africa.
No. And you're not saying people who have a 24-hour dependent. Yeah. But if all of us make better choices.
Anyone who's paying for the Spotify premium and is listening to us talk crap on good headphones while they're out for a walk with their coffee,
100%
probably has a choice.
Many choices, yeah. And this is not a judgment piece. It's an empowerment piece. And listening to you, I know it's the same from you. It's not a judgment piece. I know you get frustrated, but you want people to feel like this. And again, I'm going to say it again because it struck me so hard when you were speaking earlier on about the clarity you have about the way you want to live your life is freedom. That's freedom. And it's not perfect, and sometimes it's scary, and there's lots of confusion, and it's never structured, and you don't have that quote unquote security that you would have from a quote unquote normal 9 to 5. But it's yours, and you design it. And this whole idea of lifestyle design is very chic on Instagram at the moment, but this is what I'm saying to you. Nobody does it. I'm not even saying I'm doing it. Nobody does it. It takes bravery and guts and consistency and a willingness to do the really boring, simple things. And magic things happen out of that. So it does apply to you, and you need to feel that as well. It definitely does apply to you. But that message is important, and that's why I would say the same things in podcast 10 years from now. I say it over and over and over again, and I'm really fascinated to see how people from completely different walks of life end up saying similar things. You are in control. You can make your own decisions. You need to be consistent, to be willing to work hard, and you need to be brave. And you can do literally most things that you want in your life. And it's a great message to send, including overcoming psychological issues, eating disorders, mental health issues. You don't have to do it by yourself, and you shouldn't do it by yourself, but you have a lot of power. You have a lot of say. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And also, having said all that, I'm extremely lucky to have a very, very healthy support network around me. But no, as you said, anyone listening to this probably has a choice.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't have to be, we're not saying recreate the wheel, but it's more so just what I'm trying to do. And I don't want to say I'm preaching. I know you don't hear. It's more so just trying to encourage people who have a choice and genuinely could change things. Just that little push to be like, look, if you're really unhappy and you want to change something, just go for it. Just take the punt and go for what you actually want to do. That's really all it is. That's all we're trying to get across. Like,
oh, absolutely. And like I say this all the time, I have not got this figured out, but I'm so obsessed with building the kind of life that I want for me, my family, and my friends, and by extension, supporting other people who might not be as lucky as I am. I'm lucky. I don't like the word privilege because it's been hijacked at the moment. There's a lot of social movements using the word privilege in a negative way. I have many privileges in my life, which I'm really grateful for and I'm very aware of.
And do you know where I actually think most people fall down on this is, I actually think a lot of people initially are brave enough to let the mind wander, be like, actually, I might be able to do this. Or I could do this. Okay, right. I might actually do this. Then they tell the family or the friends. And it's that's the hardest part, is that initial pushback.
Getting out of the bucket with the crabs.
Yeah. Because they're not trying to go against you. But I think a lot of people actually do dream about these things and are like, actually get these little ideas. And they're like, I might go for this now. And then they say it out loud. And there's always that initial pushback from loved ones.
Which is a projection of fear and insecurity.
Yeah, and worry about their loved one as well. Like, there's that initial pushback. And I think that's where it's that initial pushback.
Yeah.
Like, when I first told my family and friends what I was doing, they were like, what? America? Yeah. A bicycle on your own? Like, there was pushback.
Yeah.
Understandably. But I think that's the hard part. It's not even, I think people will let themselves dream and they'll come up with little schemes and ways, oh, actually, I could do this. This might work and I could do that and I could do this on the side. And then they say it all out loud, push back, and they're like, oh, well, I can't do it now.
Yeah.
Which is hard. It's hard when loved ones push back against you.
I can't even claim that, because when I mentioned what I was going to do, I got unwavering support from my now fiance and my parents.
Well, that's just class.
My parents didn't even know what the hell I was talking about. What is a podcast? Didn't have a fucking clue. Probably still don't have a clue. I know my mom probably listened to this one now, but didn't have a clue. I would not be able to do this without the support of my parents and fiance. So I was extremely lucky. And people say, oh, you're so brave to do this. I was, and my arse brave to do this. Maybe I have to be a little bit more self-accepting.
No, you do. It was brave move.
But I got a lot of support. But it's funny when you put it out there, after that resistance, you tend to get support. When people see your passion and how serious you are about this and how you want to do it, it's inspiring to them as well. And they want to support that, even if they don't understand it. They want to support it. You will get some people, you always get the haters who are just, they resist it because they're not doing it themselves. But anybody who's close to you and really loves you and knows you will eventually say,
oh, they'll come around to it.
Do you know what? Cormac wants this. Dan fucking wants this. I don't get it. I think he's mad. I think he's completely wrong and insane here. But he really wants this, and it seems to be making him happy. I'm going to support that. And I think that's out there again for people like us in our situations. It's out there quite a lot, because if someone came to me and said they wanted to do A, B, C, and D, I'd be like, fuck yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. That is insane. I'd do anything I could to support them if I knew they needed support.
Yeah.
And most people I would feel would be the same once they got over that initial kind of resistance. So yeah, I definitely think it's out there. But man, that was great. That was a great conversation. I did ask you what's next. Did you say?
I didn't get into it.
You didn't get into it, yeah. Is there something coming next?
I don't think I'm ever going to be able to switch off that part of my brain that's aware of time. So
629.3.
82.3 years average life expectancy.
82.3 years, yeah.
So 629 months. I'll put it, at the moment I'm doing a very interesting exercise that I decided somewhere in the middle of Kansas I needed to do, whereby I said, you know what, now when you get home for that 6 months up until the new year, you're going to do this is kind of an exercise in itself, what I'm doing at the moment, an exercise to just be. Because I'm also really aware that as much as my mindset allows me to do pretty cool things and pushes me to do cool things, I'm also very aware that for a fully content life, you have to be able to take the beauty in the ordinary, the simple pleasures, and enjoy the mundane. And because there's a lot of really cool stuff in the mundane when you actually really focus on it and try and enjoy it. So since I got home on the 28th of June, I kind of decided, I was like, right, July to December is going to be an exercise in no training for any, like as in train aimlessly, as you want, if you want, when you want. No goals, no targets, no nothing. You're going to sit and just do whatever, go for coffee, go for swims, go to the gym as you want, see friends as you want and as you please until Christmas time, January. Then you have permission to allow yourself to think, right, what would I like to do next? But this 6 month period that I'm in the middle of now is an exercise in
that's great
in just being, because you also have to look after that part of life too.
Yeah.
Because there will be times where if a kid comes along or you do get a mortgage or whatever, where you can't always be chasing the big thing. So yes, it's okay to have that energy and drive for life, whereby I'm aware of time and what am I going to do to make the best of this time. But there will also be times of life where your parents might be sick. You might be sick, whereby you have to have the ability to see beauty and the value of life in going for a coffee with your friend.
Yeah.
And that's kind of also what I'm trying to work on too. And so that's what this 6 month period is really kind of about. And obviously trying to take that forward. Look, in the new year, I'm obsessed with endurance. I'm obsessed with adventure. I definitely will probably be trying to attack something next summer. I'd love to try go from Malin to Mizen in 24 hours on a bicycle. I'd love to maybe, I don't know, water is an interesting thing because I'm not so comfortable in it. We'll see. But if I'd be lying if I said to you now, he won't be doing any more mad stuff. Like, I think realistically, I probably will, fundamentally, because I just enjoy it. Like every minute that I was away, and maybe not every minute, but 9 out of 10 minutes that I was away in America, as bizarre as it may seem, that I was in blistering heat in the desert and going up the Rocky Mountains on my own with no support van, as bizarre as it may seem, I loved it.
That's class, man. That's adventure.
It was complete and utter adventure, and I loved it. So there's something in me that loves all that. So undoubtedly, I'll be doing something again. Hopefully in a place where there's less bears and snakes.
I love it.
And less risk of dying from severe dehydration in the desert. So,
Well, look, man, we'll be watching. We'll be keeping tabs. It's been a pleasure, an absolute pleasure to have you here, to be able to chat to you. And I'm sure this is the start of a beautiful friendship now. You're only up the road.
I'll have to go back playing senior football.
You have to come back playing balls so I can get a cut off you. I don't remember when we must have played each other. If you played against us 4 or 5 years ago, we must have played against each other.
I only played senior football for 3 years.
Did you?
Yeah, it was more hurling, but I'd say I do remember being out in Lawless Park.
You know what? It might have been when I had the cruise ship done. Maybe that's why we don't remember.
I remember playing one senior football game against Finns and Bells.
Maybe I was playing it.
You probably were.
Who knows?
Realistically.
But look, really, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for agreeing to come down here and give your time to me. I genuinely appreciate it. I know time is really, really valuable. You've only 629 months left and you're spending one of those days down here with me. So I really do appreciate that. Sometimes people like to reach out. I know you got a lot of people reaching out after the documentary and stuff. If there's somebody out there who maybe just wants to have a chat or run something by you, is that okay?
Yeah,
can they reach out to you?
They'll find me.
Where'll they find you?
On
Instagram?
Yeah.
On Instagram. It's at Cormac Ryan?
Yeah.
At Cormac Ryan. Nice and simple, your name.
Nice and simple, yeah.
Perfect. And you're not selling a book or Plug on a course you want to plug right now?
There's absolutely nothing I want to plug. I am as bog standard as they come.
Deadly. And if you want to support Cormac's next cycling race and have your name plastered across his chest on his...
Now that actually, if there's some rich entrepreneur out there who wants to, because these things cost a hell of a lot of money, if there's some rich entrepreneur out there who wants to throw a lot of money and be like, I like what you're doing here, here's a lot of money, go set up an expedition, go for it.
What does it cost actually out of interest? Ballpark, like a trip like the America trip.
America was probably 10 grand.
Was it? Yeah.
Probably as in I have destroyed my life savings going. And that's the other thing. Like, again, like we talk about like people are like, I can't do these things. You can. And people are like, oh, well, you must be so lucky to do them. Trust me, when I say I've destroyed my life savings and I probably could have had a mortgage on a house by now. And this isn't me saying that to feel sorry for me. I'm just saying we all have a choice.
Yeah.
So like I have decimated my life savings, and that was my choice to do these things, Europe and America and 2 cycles previously, because I wanted to do them. Because the only bit of sponsorship I've ever got was from Mark Donnelly and HUH Clothing out in Ashburn.
Gentleman.
Absolute gentleman.
Gentleman, yeah.
Who, for whatever reason, liked what I was doing and said, you know what, no, give you a bit of financial support. But Mark would tell you himself, like, Mark's a single man band Irish company. There's only so much he could do for me.
Yeah.
So like America probably, it was probably the guts of 10 grand.
Yeah. And it's annoying as well because you're trying to give as much money towards the cause as well. So you don't want it to cost you a ton of money.
Any donation that was ever made goes to charity. Yeah. That was one thing. Like the only way I could ever get help to fund it was that if a business wanted to sponsor me, I'd now, any donation that was made to that donations page goes to the charity.
Deadly.
And thankfully, a few people through a GoFundMe helped me get a few nights accommodation along the way. But yeah, we're probably talking 10 grand. Europe could have been another 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, but look, what is it? At the end of the day, it facilitates you doing these things that you want to do, and it helps other people. So like, what is it? It's money's energy, as they say.
But I obviously can't keep doing.
No. We need sponsorship. Let's get this man sponsored.
I only have 5 more continents to go, so if there's any rich businessman,
maybe for the next one you could race Conor O'Keefe. He could run and you could cycle.
You couldn't race that fella. He's a gazelle.
It's the paces we were saying it on the pace. He was running those fucking 32.
You need to get him on a bike.
Would he go on a bike?
I haven't even met the man now. I've been following him for years.
No, I know Conor. Yeah, we get him up on a bike. I'd do it on a bike now. I wouldn't run it. I'm a terrible cyclist, but I get up on a bike.
I'm a terrible cyclist too.
Yeah, that's fair.
So.
Well, look, we'll wrap it up there. Otherwise, we'll dive right back in and be here another. I don't know how long this is. Probably 2 hours or so. But thank you once again, Cormac.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate your time, and we'll chat to you soon.
Yeah.